I remember it like it was yesterday. February 6, 2011, Super Bowl 45. The Pittsburgh Steelers versus the Green Bay Packers. With less than a minute remaining in the first half, Ben Roethlisberger leads the Steelers down the field, hoping to put points on the board before halftime. With just 46 seconds left, he drops back and finds Hines Ward in the end zone. The score becomes 10-21. Green Bay gets the ball back and decides to run the clock out. The players head back to their locker rooms, and before you know it, the halftime show is moments away. And then, just like every year, the broadcast cuts to commercial, but little did we know what was about to appear on our screens. That TV spot was my very first memory of Transformers Dark of the Moon. I remember vividly running over to my mom after it aired. I was so excited that I asked her if she could call my aunt so I can talk to my little cousin, who at the time, he was just as big of a Transformers fan as I was. For the next 10 minutes, we talked non-stop about what we had just seen. What was that giant bird-looking Transformer? What was that massive worm creature? Who were these new characters? What was going on? We had absolutely no idea, but we were hooked. And to this day, I can still remember hearing that haunting music from the trailer, that horn, that atmosphere, the feeling that something huge was coming. At the time, we didn't know it, but that TV spot was just the beginning of one of the greatest cinematic experiences I have ever had. And 15 years later, I still believe Transformers Dark of the Moon is not only one of the greatest Transformers movies ever made, it's one of the greatest action movies of all time. I cannot believe it's already been 15 years since this film premiered. Thinking about that definitely makes me feel old. And 15 years later, this movie still holds a special place in my heart and has aged like fine wine. One of the things that stands out the most to me is just how confident this movie feels. By the time Michael Bay got to Dark of the Moon, this was his third Transformers movie, and it feels like this was the moment where everything finally clicked. The first Transformers movie introduced us to the world. Revenge of the Fallen had some incredible moments, but was held back by the writer's strike and a lot of story issues. But Dark of the Moon, man, this felt like Michael Bay finally mastered how to make a Transformers movie. The scale was bigger, the visuals were cleaner, the action was easier to follow, the stakes felt larger than ever. Every frame of this movie feels massive. Whether it's the moon sequence, the highway chase, the driller attack, or the Battle of Chicago, Bay understood exactly how to make giant robots feel larger than life. And one of the most underappreciated aspects of these movies, especially this one, is the fact that so much of this movie was filmed on location and practical. Nowadays, it feels like every major blockbuster is shot on a soundstage, or on a production lot, or inside the volume. Actors standing in front of giant LED screens pretending they're somewhere else. Now, don't get me wrong, that technology has its place, but there is something special about seeing a movie that was actually filmed on location. And that's one of the reasons Dark of the Moon still feels so massive 15 years later. Michael Bay wanted to put cameras in real places, real streets, real buildings, real cities, real destruction. Hell, they were able to shoot at NASA, which is a huge accomplishment within itself. You can call Michael Bay a lot of things, but a lazy CGI director? Absolutely not. The amount of practical effects, real stunts, real explosions, and on-location filming in this movie is honestly insane. Take, for example, the wingsuit sequence. That was real. The Chicago sequences were filmed in Chicago. They were actually able to shut down many major streets to film. The collapsing building sequence involved an actual set, and you can feel it while watching the movie. And I think that's one of the biggest reasons why Dark of the Moon still looks a lot better than modern blockbuster movies today. Because Michael Bay wasn't trying to fake reality. He could have definitely taken the easy way out and shot everything in a lot, but no. He was putting actors and cameras right in the middle of it, and the movie is 10 times better because of it. And regardless of what anyone thinks about the Bay films, it's hard to deny that Dark of the Moon represents Michael Bay at the peak of his Transformer filmmaking abilities. And then of course everything went to shit from here. But that's not what we're here to talk about.
It's the 90-minute commercial. Here we go. Ready? Ready? Go one more time. Ready, Mike? 1, 2, 3. Boom! Bam!
When people talk about Dark of the Moon, the first thing that usually comes up is the action, and for good reason. This movie is packed with iconic action sequences. The highway chase remains one of the best action scenes in the entire franchise. From the urgency of protecting Sentinel Prime to Steve Jablonsky's iconic battle score blasting in the background. Everything about that sequence just works. One of the adrenaline-inducing moments is when Dino, or Mirage, transforms in mid-air and launches those grappling hooks onto Hatchet. What an awesome sequence, man. The driller attack on the city is unforgettable, especially the collapsing building sequence. The wingsuit sequence just feels insane 15 years later. And the fact that so much of it was done practically is even crazier. And then there's the Battle of Chicago. The Battle of Chicago isn't just the best battle in Transformers history, it's one of the greatest large-scale action set pieces ever put on film. The sense of destruction, the scale, the feeling that humanity is genuinely losing hope. Humans getting evaporated left and right. Everything about it absolutely works. The Decepticons actually feel threatening, except Megatron, which we'll get to that later. The city feels occupied, the Autobots feel overwhelmed, and you just don't know how they're gonna win. And that's something many modern blockbusters struggle to capture. Every major action sequence here feels important. Every explosion feels earned, even if it felt unnecessary at times. Michael Bay definitely went off on the explosions. But every battle has weight, and that's why these scenes have remained memorable for 15 years. And as incredible as the action is, it wouldn't hit nearly as hard without the music. And in my opinion, Dark of the Moon contains Steve Jablonsky's greatest Transformers score. This soundtrack is absolutely phenomenal. Battle, Sentinel Prime, It's Our Fight, Shockwave's Revenge, Dark Side of the Moon, it's all incredible. The music doesn't just accompany the action, it elevates it. One great example is the Optimus Prime rage scene. Without Steve Jablonsky's score, it would just feel like another day of Optimus Prime cutting down Decepticons. But with It's Our Fight playing, it feels like Optimus is humanity's last hope. Like this is the final stand, the final push. The heroic themes, the haunting choir, the massive horns, the emotional moments. Everything feels larger than life. To this day, I still listen to this score while driving, working out, or just relaxing. Anytime I hear it, I'm instantly transported back to being 10 years old, back to the Battle of Chicago, back to sitting in that theater completely blown away. And that's what great film music does. It becomes inseparable from the experience. To this day, I think Steve Jablonsky is one of the most underrated composers working in Hollywood today. And without him, these first 3 Transformers movies would not be nearly as iconic as they are today. So thank you, Mr. Jablonsky, for all the memories. And I can't talk about this movie without paying tribute to our boy, Ironhide. His death caused so much emotional damage to an entire generation of Transformer fans. Nobody saw this coming. Nobody. I still remember sitting in the theater and feeling my entire stomach drop when that first shot hit Ironhide. At first you're thinking, no way this is happening. And then the second blast hits and suddenly it's real. Ironhide is gone. Just like that. For years, Ironhide had been Optimus Prime's most loyal soldier, the Autobot weapons specialist, the guy who was always ready for a fight. And Sentinel Prime knew exactly what he was doing. He knew as long as Ironhide was alive, the Decepticons stood no chance. And that's why he had to go first. Looking back now, it's still one of the most shocking deaths in Transformers history. Gone but never forgotten. R.I.P. our boy Ironhide. And speaking of Ironhide's death, let's talk about the Prime responsible, Sentinel Prime. In my opinion, the greatest Transformers villain outside of Megatron himself. Nobody expected the betrayal. Nobody. This was Optimus Prime's mentor, the last person anyone expected to turn against the Autobots. And once it happened, everything went to shit. And that's what made Sentinel so terrifying. He was powerful enough to back up every threat he made. And then you add Leonard Nimoy's performance. Absolutely iconic. The voice, the presence, the authority. Every time Sentinel spoke, you listened. Leonard Nimoy gave us one of the greatest performances in Transformers history. A true legend. R.I.P. Leonard Nimoy. But with all that being said, fuck Sentinel Prime. 15 years later, this dude is still traumatizing Transformer fans. His actions today still haunt Optimus. His actions still haunt the franchise. And that's exactly what makes him such a great villain. And before I move on, I have to give a shout out to Agent Simmons, because John Turturro was operating on an entirely different level in this movie. He steals every scene he appears in. Every line delivery is memorable. The man was an absolute menace. Honestly, Simmons was so powerful, such a threat, that they had to keep him away from the Battle of Chicago, because if Agent Simmons showed up, Sentinel Prime would have been finished in 5 minutes. He is an absolute legend. And of course, I gotta give a big shout out to Dutch, another MVP of this movie. This guy was a complete badass. One thing that's always baffled me was when Agent Simmons gets thrown out of the car, Dutch says that he's fired, and then the next scene that we see him in, he has a neck brace. What happened to Dutch? Without Dutch, the Autobots would not have won the Battle of Chicago, so shout out to Dutch as well. Thank you, John Turturro, for all the amazing memories. Another thing I appreciate more as I've gotten older is Shia LaBeouf's performance. I thought he absolutely killed it in this movie. Sam Witwicky feels more unhinged than ever before, and in a good way. Can't forget the iconic bathroom scene though. But on a serious note, as always, Shia overacted in this role, but man was he phenomenal. Sam's frustration feels real. His desire to matter feels real. He wants to contribute. He wants to help. He wants to prove he's more than just the guy who used to save the world. And honestly, that's a relatable place for a character to be. No matter how crazy things get, Shia always feels invested. And because of that, we stay invested too. And whether people realize it or not, this movie was also Sam Witwicky's send-off. And what a way to go out. For 3 movies, we watched this kid go from a regular teenager to helping save the world. We watched him grow up. We watched him fail. We watched him succeed. And through all of it, Shia LaBeouf carried the role. Love him or hate him, Transformers would not have become what it is without Shia LaBeouf. He helped define an entire generation of blockbuster movies. He made Sam feel human and relatable. And in one way or another, I think all of us saw a little bit of ourselves in Sam Witwicky. So thank you, Shia, for helping create one of the most iconic characters in Transformers/cinema history. Even if you're kind of a dick now these days. Now, if there's one area of the movie that never fully worked for me, it's the relationship between Sam and Carly. I've always preferred Sam and Michaela, and boy do I miss 2009 Megan Fox. And I think a lot of fans feel the same way. That being said, I can appreciate what they're trying to do in this movie. The film wanted to give Sam a more mature relationship. It wanted to add emotional stakes. It wanted to show where his life had gone after saving the world multiple times. Did it work perfectly? Not for me, but I appreciate the attempt. And honestly, it doesn't take away from the overall experience. Another thing that didn't work for me in this movie was Megatron. They did our boy dirty in this movie. Megatron was not a threat whatsoever. And really, ever since Revenge of the Fallen, he's never been a threat and has always been a backup villain behind someone else. And we're talking about Megatron, one of, if not the greatest villain of all time. He should never have to play backup to anyone. But yeah, I've said my piece on that. Megatron deserves better. And you cannot talk about the Dark of the Moon era without talking about the Mech Tech toy line. The Dark of the Moon Mech Tech toy line remains one of my favorite Transformers toy lines ever. I love those figures. I love the packaging. I love the weapons. I love going to the stores looking for new releases. To this day, I can still picture those toy aisles flooded with Net Tech Transformers. And of course, how could I forget Cyberverse? Those little guys were a huge part of my childhood. I can remember running around my living room with the Cyberverse Arc, pretending I was shooting down Decepticon ships. Both toy lines were just so good. We really didn't know how good we had it back then. And what's crazy is, I still own many of the original Dark of the Moon figures to this day. Every time I look at them, I immediately transported back to that summer, back to the excitement and anticipation, back to being a kid obsessed with Transformers. These toys weren't just merchandise, they were part of the experience. And for me, they'll always be tied to the memories I made during that era. Something people forget now is that Dark of the Moon was supposed to be the ending. That was it. The grand finale, the conclusion, the final chapter of the original trilogy. And because of that, they knew they had to go out with a bang, and boy did they ever. The scale was bigger, the action was bigger, the stakes were bigger, the emotional moments hit harder. Everything about this movie feels like a finale. It feels like a movie that knows this is the last ride. And while we would eventually get more Transformer movies afterwards, Dark of the Moon still feels like the true ending of that era. The ending of the story that began in 2007, and it's one hell of a send-off. In conclusion, when I think about Transformers Dark of the Moon, I don't just think about a movie. I think about an experience. I think about that Super Bowl trailer. I think about talking to my cousin on the phone. I think about searching toy aisles for MetTech figures. I think about sitting in a packed theater watching the Battle of Chicago unfold for the first time. I think about hearing Steve Jablonsky's incredible score echo through the speakers. I think about witnessing what felt like the biggest movie event imaginable. And of course, I couldn't end this video without talking about what might be the most iconic sequence in Transformers history. It's our fight. Autobots and humans versus Shockwave and the Decepticons. Pure adrenaline. That's the only way to describe it. Every single person in this sequence is locked in. The soldiers are fighting for survival. The Autobots are fighting for Earth. Humanity is making one final stand. And then Steve Jablonsky's score kicks in, the music swells, the emotion hits, and suddenly, this doesn't feel like a giant robot movie anymore. It feels like the fate of the world is hanging in the balance. Then Optimus arrives. Sam sees him, calls out to him, "Optimus!" And Optimus literally comes flying down from the heavens. And what follows is one of the most badass sequences ever put on film. Optimus tearing through Decepticons, the music reaching its peak, the battle turning in humanity's favor. It's absolute cinema. 10-year-old me sat in that theater completely speechless, just staring at the screen in awe. And 15 years later, I still get chills watching it. That's the power of Dark of the Moon. That's why we're still talking about it. That's why it still matters. It's definitely not perfect whatsoever, but it delivered something unforgettable. And 15 years later, I still believe it stands among the greatest action movies ever made. Not just because of the explosions, not just because of the visual effects, not just because of Optimus Prime, but because of how it made us feel. It's one of the greatest cinematic experiences of all time. And that's why Transformers Dark of the Moon will always be more than meets the eye. Happy 15th anniversary, Dark of the Moon.